My reason for being here on Earth is to provide ideas and insights that'll help other people live their great purpose.
Welcome to Common Denominator, where we uncover the universal truths that connect us all. I'm your host, Moshe Popak. My guest today knows a thing or two about leading through uncertainty.
If the mission is I need to get intelligence, then we need to figure out how to get in there and get intelligence.
Dr. Patrick Leddin has worn many hats: U.S. Army Ranger, Qualified Officer, and Master Parachutist, and now professor at Vanderbilt University. And his brand new book, Disrupt Everything, co-written with none other than James Patterson.
Now I look at a project like this, that's why I wanted to do this so badly, is I think that a lot of people out there are frustrated, they're just getting by, the team's just kind of hanging in there.
On this episode, Patrick and I dig into how discipline, adaptability, and human connection shape leadership in the military, in business, and in life.
The times where I was sometimes my worst version as a dad was the times where they did something and I just reacted. And lo and behold, half the time I reacted wrong.
What's a good practical way to be able to pull the trigger and be accountable for what happens?
I think leadership ultimately requires the ability to deal with a lot of different tensions.
Hi, Patrick, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Hey, Moshe, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here today.
Thank you. So I see in the background, you have your new book, Disrupt Everything. And I'm a little bit of a fanboy of James Patterson. How did that come to be? And who is he as a person working day to day with James?
Yeah, well, I'll start off by saying working day to day with him is great. But there was a journey to getting to that point, how it came to be. Actually, I was teaching at Vanderbilt University. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm a professor at Vanderbilt. And if you go way back to a few years ago when COVID hit, there was an opportunity at Vanderbilt to teach some new classes because they said, well, we need some classes that are online to larger groups of students. If you're a professor and you have a proposal, please submit it. So I submitted a proposal saying I want to teach a class about leading business through times of crisis. And I thought there was a great opportunity to have conversation with students about how do you lead through some challenging times. And you fast forward a year or so after we kind of gotten over the major hump of COVID, and we're back in the classroom, so we're no longer online, but I'm able to still teach that class. And one section of that class, we decided to make it more of a experience for students to have guest speakers come in. So imagine, Moshe, you're sitting in class with 25, 30 other students, relatively small class, and in walks at the time Doug Parker, the CEO of American Airlines, and Sarah Nelson, the president of the Flight Attendants Association. And together, they talk about how labor and management worked through COVID. So it's like this intimate, cool experience with these kind of heavy hitters, if you will, coming into class. And one person that I was able to get to come to class is James Patterson. And Patterson is a graduate of Vanderbilt University, so there was a relationship there. And he came in and he gave a presentation to the students called The Power of Disruption, is what he called it. And in the particular presentation, he started off with this idea of asking them the question of, are you living a good life? Was the first thing he asked the students. And then he said, it's a simple question at one level, but the answer is not simplistic. And he went through the process then of teaching them telling them how he lived his own good life. You may or may not know, but he used to be the president of J. Walter Thompson, a big ad agency. He was on the campaign. He wrote the tagline, I'm a Toys R Us kid. So he really was successful in that space, but he wanted to write. So he ended up giving up that CEO job to focus on writing, and then the rest of it, as they say, is history. But hundreds of millions of book copies, multiple genres, lots of books, lots of bestsellers, Guinness Book of World Record type of stuff, amazing amount of co-authors. And by the time he was done with that, I was like, gosh, I want to do some research around disruption. And I started framing it in my mind of saying, how do people, when they're faced with the disruption, it could be something small or something big, how do they, in that moment, decide to lean into it and find something positive they can take from it? So I approached Jim and Patterson and I said, hey, I like you, you like me, let's write a book together. And you might imagine he didn't answer that one, right? That was like the worst sales pitch ever. So then I followed up a little bit later explaining why I thought it made sense. I've had some success writing in the leadership space. That would be a new genre for him. I think we could do some really cool stuff together. Years ago, I worked with Stephen Covey at Franklin Covey, and I saw what he did with 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I thought there was really an opportunity here. So he agreed to give me a chance. And quite frankly, I missed on the first couple of outlines. We were going back and forth and we just couldn't make it happen. But ultimately, about 9 months later, we got it going. I got a research team at the university. We spent a couple of years studying this, and that's what turned into the book. I will tell you that when you say, like, what's it like working with James Patterson? He's a really busy guy. I mean, he has lots of projects going on. If you're talking to him on Zoom, in his background, there's just stacks of yellow legal pads with handwritten manuscripts where he's writing things out. And I asked him the other day, like, how many do you have going? He said, I have like 28 projects right now I'm working on. But what it's become over the course of time, it's become a true partnership. It's a 50-50 who's written stuff in the book. I've gotten so much better as a writer. I thought I was pretty decent, but I talk to somebody like him and I start to realize, like, what keeps people engaged and how you turn the page. And you can have some grand idea, but if nobody's reading it, where's it going? And no, I just enjoy my time with him. I enjoy eating dinner with him. I enjoy hanging out with him. I enjoy calling him up. He's a Wisconsin fan, University of Wisconsin fan. I enjoy calling him up and telling him his team did well or tell them they didn't do so well. So it's a great partnership.
I love that. What would you say from the book, key takeaways? What sticks out the most for you or for Jim or together that really is unique and impactful to the listeners?
Yeah, I think for me, I would say that as we went out and studied positive disruptors, as we named them, and I interviewed, together with Jim, we interviewed 350 people around the world. These are like long form, hour plus interviews with 350 people. And that takes a long time to interview these people, get the transcript, kind of go through and analyze and look for the key things that are popping out of them and start to organize it. So we went through the process of interviewing 350 different people and surveyed thousands more over a few years. And as we did that, what started to come out to me in this is this reality that they don't just react to everything. They step back and they think about what's their greater purpose. What are they trying to achieve? Where do they want to go in life? Why do they think they're here? Or why do they think their team or organization is here? So what's that purpose? Or we call it in the book, the fire inside. We use a fire analogy in the book. And then based upon that, they discern what role they want to take on. And to me, it was really interesting to start thinking about the roles that they take on. So we talk in the book about 5 different roles that positive disruptors take on. Each one has a fire component to it. So it can be a little bit like I might lead out on my own and we call that person a trailblazer. Or I might say, you know what, now's not the right time. And that person's a firefighter. You kind of get the idea. But the point that I think that's really interesting about the role is, unlike a personality assessment where I'd be like, you are a firefighter, therefore you're always a firefighter. This one is, you might have a tendency to be a firefighter, but what does the situation call for you to be? And how do you reconcile those two? And for me, that's been a really interesting takeaway from the research. And I watch people as they respond to that and to think about, like, what role do I want to take? What do I want to lean into moving forward? And I think for Jim, because from the very beginning, he talked a lot about relationships and a lot about connections with other people. And I think for him, probably the biggest thing he wanted to emphasize in the work is that we have these 4 fundamental facts in the book. And the third one is that relationships in life provide headwinds and tailwinds. And to help people think through the idea that sometimes in life you have people who are helping you out, pushing you along like as if you're running and the wind's at your back. And then other times you have wind in your face. And we kind of owe it to ourselves and to the other people to have conversations about the headwind moments, how we can turn a relationship that may have gone sour back a different way if we choose to disrupt that relationship. So I think he would talk a lot about relationships and the importance of relationships.
You talk a lot about leading in uncertain times. If someone is in a leadership position, how would they be able to learn that trait? How would they be able, there's all these things that are kind of going on and you don't really know the answer and you have to take a decision because people are relying on you. What's a good practical way to be able to pull the trigger and be accountable for what happens?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we do live in a kind of a world of uncertainty. We see it every day in the news headlines, and it doesn't matter which day you listen to this, folks, there's something going on, whether it's tariffs or economic uncertainty, whether it's something global or something close to home. There's always something going on that can kind of throw you into an uncertain place. I think leadership ultimately requires the ability to deal with a lot of different tensions. Do I lean in or do I pull back? Do I help somebody out or directly, or do I coach them? Do I think more strategic or do I stay more focused on executing today? And it's that constant tension that are going on and on. I think the same thing in uncertainty to some degree. There's this tension of like, what do I do? When do I move forward? When do I pull back? Obviously, if you want to deal well through uncertain times, one of the best things you can do is be building relationships long before those times come along, and building plans and getting to know your people. We talk in the book about, through the research, there's 16 behaviors of positive disruptors. That's a lot. That's a big number of behaviors. Not one person had all of those behaviors, but what we find is on teams and in groups, all those behaviors start to pop up. Things like casting visions and looking closely at brutal reality, or rolling your sleeves up and getting your hands dirty, all these different behaviors. So I would suggest that one thing you can do before the uncertainty even hits, or even if there's a pause in that moment, is to get to know your people better. Get really clear on what everybody brings to the table and how you can collaboratively use it, because that's how you get through uncertainty oftentimes, is you collaborate and innovate and come up with changes that will have an impact on the business or the team or the organization. I think it's also important that before this disruptive moment hits, that you get clear on, like, why do we exist? And what's the purpose of our team? What are we talented at? What are we passionate about? What's the gap in the world we're filling? These are really critical things, because in those uncertain moments where you're not sure, should you go left or should you go right, the question often comes, well, which one will help us move closer to the path of our more important purpose? You asked tactically. So tactically, what do you do? Well, I think there's several things. We actually spell out what we call 27 positive disruptor moves in the book. And the book has lots of stories, and stories are great. The book has lots of models and kind of ways to see the world and take action, which is great. But it also has these 27 little things that you can do that can make a big difference in the moment. So I'll give you a couple of those, and your audience a couple of those, just to think about it. One is to really kind of check your receipts. In other words, sometimes when we hit uncertain times where we're not sure what to do, we start to wonder if we're even the right person to make it happen, or we're the right team to make it happen, or we can't even get through this thing. And what we found through our research is that a lot of times, one of the most effective things you can do is you can take a moment and just check your receipts. Like, go through your mind and think about obstacles you've overcome in the past, or challenges your team has met in the past, and how you've dealt with those things. And there's something really powerful in those moments when you start to realize, hey, I've dealt with this stuff before. I've overcome things. It wasn't exactly this thing, but it was something. You start to realize, I can do it again. So that's one idea, is like the idea of check your receipts. And another one is to really think about the role that you're going to fill today. So we all fill lots of different roles in our lives, and sometimes even in a leadership role. Sometimes you're more strategic thinking. Sometimes you're more the doer and you roll up your sleeves. Sometimes you're more the director of resources. And the idea is to think, like, which role am I going to play right now in this meeting, in this session, in this engagement with a client, in this conversation with my employee, and just own that role stepping into it, as opposed to just kind of getting into the middle of it and just going with the flow. Be more, thoughtful in that.
You kind of talked about, like, the leader who is not reactive, that they're actually able to stay calm. Are there practices that can help you do that, to not, right? You don't want to be that always reactive, always on the defense.
As Jim and I were looking to bring this book to the world, as you might imagine, we thought about what are other ways to do it beyond a book itself. And obviously podcasts are a great way to do it and share some of the thoughts. Another way is to create a course around it. And I had a relationship or a conversation started with the Franklin Covey company, I mentioned earlier, Stephen Covey, and they're building a course on this book called Disrupt Everything, Innovate for Impact. And one thing that I think that will answer this question is that one thing that Covey taught me over the years was this idea that in these moments of choice, in these moments where we're not sure exactly what to do or which way to go, sometimes our worst self will just react. And it comes in all sorts of forms, right? If this person says this, I'm going to go off the handle. If I walk into this meeting, I know it's going to be a bad meeting. All of those kind of reactive things. Well, we know that more effective people are proactive. And one thing that Franklin Covey talks about is this idea, and I think it's a great one to kind of keep in your mind, that every time you have these moments where you're not sure what to do, or there's been this stimulus, the best thing you can do is these three things. One is pause. Just pause for a moment. Take a beat. The second one is clarify. Get really clear on what it is is going on or what you're being asked to do, and then decide what to do. And I have a couple kids. They're still my kids, but they're 32 and 28 now. And I can just think back, like, the times when I was the best version of myself as a dad, for example, of the leader of my family, if you will, were the times where I paused and clarified and decided what to do. The times where I was sometimes my worst version as a dad was the times where, they did something and I just reacted. And lo and behold, half the time I reacted wrong. So, and then you have to circle around and apologize and make this thing right. So I think the ability to, in those moments, to just pause for a second, take a beat, clarify what's going on. What did you say? Did I hear this right? Help me understand this. I have a concern here. Ask those type of questions and then decide what to do, keeping in mind the bigger goals and the bigger purpose.
It's interesting you mentioned about clarity. I guess my day job, I'm a real estate investor, and I invest in other businesses. And I tell people, if you can have that clarity and come to me with kind of the back of a napkin and say, okay, as an investment, this is how everybody involved is going to make money. I said, I would come and invest there. But what's interesting, what I found is that it's very hard for people to have that clarity. I know you can ask clarifying questions, but, I want to open this cafe and I want to do that. But to really break your mind and your brain to get exactly the visual of how it's going to work and how it's going to happen, I find that when I'm dealing person by person by person, to have that complete clarity from a conservative basis, right? Like, this is going to happen, plan A, B, C, D, but we're going to pivot and see it before it happens. How can you give tools for people to develop that way to have more and more clarity? Are there ways to do that?
Yeah, there are. And we offer some ideas in the book. So don't quote me specifically on this, although I'm putting it on this huge podcast, so lots of people will go count the pages. But there's about 380, 390 pages in the book. About 50 of those pages are actually tools or worksheets in the back of the book. And one of those worksheets asks you a few questions to think through, like when a disruption happens, AI is changing the way we do work here, whatever that might be. You write the disruption down and then you think, okay, what insights can you gain from that disruption? What new customer expectations are being set? What are people expecting? Like, oh, it's all going to be done on an app, or it's all going to be here available this way or that way, or whatever it might be. What do you believe is some of the new truths, if you will, lowercase truths of the world going on there? And then at the same time, you think, okay, if that disruption is causing these new expectations or these new opportunities, take a look at what you're currently trying to achieve and look at the results you're getting right now. And if the results you're getting right now are less than you like, then think about that insight of what's going on with that disruption and say, is there something within that disruption that can help me advance what I want to do? And then from there, it goes through kind of planning and who needs to be involved in it, kind of walks you through that so that on, one page, if you will, you start to get your mind wrapped around something. But you said something about a back of the envelope. I'm a big advocate, as much as I like spreadsheets and modeling and all that type of stuff and data. I'm a big advocate of a back of an envelope. And there actually was, you asked me how this project came to be. There was actually a real back of the envelope moment for me where I had to get clear on something. So I had written up, with Jim's direction, 2 different outlines kind of spread out over the course of a couple months. And quite frankly, he hated both of them. He didn't like either one of those outlines. It was kind of like, go back to the drawing board. And after I missed on the second outline, I kind of thought, this may or may not happen. So I started to think through, and I thought to myself, okay, who can help me? Who else out there would like to see this book show up in the world? And one person I thought would like to see this book show up in the world is the Chancellor of Vanderbilt. Patterson went to Vanderbilt. I'm teaching at Vanderbilt. It'd probably be good for Vanderbilt to have this book come together. So I sat down literally on a piece of paper and I wrote out what I would tell him about what I needed and about the level of confidence I'd have in this project if he supported me. So imagine this. I walk in, I set up an appointment with the Chancellor of Vanderbilt, Daniel Diermeyer, which in my world is a professor, or I was a director of undergraduate business. I don't really interact with the Chancellor. He's way up here. I'm just doing my thing in the classroom and with students. But I made an appointment with him and I went in and I said this to him right off the back of my envelope. I said, Chancellor Diermeyer, I have a 15% chance of writing a book with arguably one of the most successful graduates of our university, James Patterson. But if you give me what I want, it's going to immediately go to 50%. So I'm going to go from 15% to 50%. And if I do what I promise you I'm going to do, it'll go up 2 to 3% every month. So I had done some thinking about this. He said, what do you want? I said, well, I need some help with the research team. I need some resources to do it, etc. And he basically took a bet on me. He said, all right, I'll give it to you. So one thing we talk about in the book is, sometimes you got to ask for more. And that's what I did right there. So I asked, if you take 2 to 3% a month, so 2.5% on average per month, and you run it out, so 50% plus 2.5%, and you run it out, when it hits 100%, that's exactly the month we sold the book, which I think is really interesting. So, sometimes they say, oh, I just pulled things out of thin air. Other times it's like, no, you have some instincts. You know what kind of needs to happen. If you take some time and write this thing out about what you believe to be true and quantify it and going, confidently and share it with people, that's a lot of clarity about what can be done.
What would you say? I know you spend time as an Army Ranger.
Yeah.
What would be the overlap, spending the time there and then in business leadership?
When I was in the military, I got stationed at a unit called the 82nd Airborne Division. So we got paid to jump out of perfectly good airplanes. And I remember the first time I showed up at my new unit there, I was probably like 22, 23 years old. And they said to me, we're going to do a nighttime parachute jump. I was like, okay, no problem. I've done a jump at night before. I got this. Dude, I had never seen a nighttime parachute jump like I was about to experience here. It was 2:00 in the morning. We had 22 airplanes, 1,500 paratroopers. And in 2 minutes' time, all of those paratroopers are going to be in the air. So imagine 22 planes flying over, 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, 1,500 people are on the ground. And it's dark and it's kind of like intense and you're packed in the airplane. But even though it was kind of a lot of new things, it was things that I'd been trained to do. So I'd been trained how to, check my equipment and hook up to the static line and go out the door and do all those things. And once I got out the plane, I was trained how to handle each step there. So I jumped out and I counted to 4,000. I looked up and I had a parachute and that was good. And there was nobody around me. That's a good thing. And then I looked down below me and I was realizing I'm not dropped in the right spot. I'm going to crash into these pine trees. There were these 200-foot tall pine trees in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm going right into them with a whole bunch of my new friends. There was nothing I could do about that. I was going to go into the trees, but I had been trained about how to go into the trees. So I did everything they told me then too. And I crashed through the trees and it was kind of bang, 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 bang. And then I was hanging there in the pitch dark. I don't know how far I am from the ground, but I literally can't see my hand in front of my face, but that's okay too. I was okay. And I've been taught how to handle it when you land in the trees. And they said, if you feel like you can safely get out of the trees, here's how to do it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give that a try. And I remember I reached up on my harness. For those who can see this, I reached up and I pulled down on my harness. And I kid you not, I slipped about that far and I was standing on the ground and I was fine. So the military taught me sometimes like there's these things that you can anticipate and you can have steps or processes or procedures to follow. And if you're trained and you lean into them, most of the time you're going to be okay, just like that jump. But then they also taught me there's times where just stuff's going to come out of nowhere and you have to figure out how to handle it. And that's where they talk about you have to adapt and improvise and overcome. So when I think about what we write about in the book here, we do talk about, hey, there's lots of things you can prepare for. I mean, people who live in Florida recognize that hurricanes come at some frequency. You probably need to have a plan for it, but you might not anticipate some other things that could happen. Or there's so many things that could possibly happen. There's no way you're going to create a plan for all of them. So then the question becomes, how do you improvise and adapt and overcome? And in the case of the military, you improvise and adapt and overcome by saying, what's the mission right now? What am I trying to do? If the mission is I need to get intelligence, then we need to figure out how to get in there and get intelligence. If the mission in your life is I want to impact the lives of others, or I want to put out the world's best podcast, or you're going to figure out how to get through those disruptive moments. So I think there's a lot of parallels between the two. At the end of the day, we don't want the people in our organizations or on our teams to always have to look at the leader and say, what do I do next, boss? We want the people on the teams or in the organizations to go, I know what we're trying to achieve. I know what we value. I know what our purpose is. I know who we are. And I'm going to make some decisions that are going to align with those in the moment of disruption. And you can't dictate from top down in an organization what everybody's going to do, just like you can't really dictate successfully in your family everything you want everybody to do. People need to align and make choices.
And I know you mentioned family. I know I personally work with my wife, and I know you built Wedgwood that you sold in 2012. How was that experience working together with your wife for the people that do? I'm just wondering for you.
Yeah. It was great and it was horrible at times. And then she would probably tell you the same. I mean, it was great because I love working with my wife. She's actually a professor at Vanderbilt, so I see her a lot of times. And I've been married 34 years. We have 2 great kids, 2 grandkids. I mean, we've written a great journey for ourselves, and it's been wonderful. It was also really tough because more me than her, but I was not really good at recognizing the different roles we fulfilled and switching from one to the other in ways that she kind of needed me to do. So in other words, I always kind of thought, yeah, you're my wife, but you're also my business partner. So everything turned into a business meeting or a business conversation or raising our children. It was always like there was a third child at the table called Wedgwood. And quite frankly, not differentiating those, I paid a price for it. She and I would travel sometimes together for work. We had offices in a few cities. We traveled together for work. I was kind of busy, like most people are. She was busy. I'd run from one meeting to another. And I remember one time I was coming back to Louisville, which is where we lived at the time. I was coming from a meeting. I missed my flight because that meeting ran late coming out of Washington, D.C. So I changed it to another time. I got in. We were going to meet. We were supposed to get together and then go someplace that night. I called her up, said, I'm missing my flight. I'm coming in late. I'll just meet you there, type of thing. And this is totally true. On the way home from that event, we're both driving home in separate cars because I had to go there separately. As on the way home, I looked down at my tank and I'm about to run out of gas on my dashboard. So I get out of my car at the next closest place to get gas, and there was no roof over the gas pumps at this place. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the sky just opened up. So I was drenched. I ran out of gas, or I was too busy driving to get gas. I got soaking wet because I had no preparation for it. And when I got home that day, I opened up the garage door, and my wife was standing in the garage waiting for me. And she said, we need to talk. You know what that means, right? We need to talk. This thing has gone sideways. Our relationship is sideways. I'm not getting what I want. There's a lot going on here. And that took 6 months to a year of unpacking and working through. And I would just say that was tough. But it was also great because the fact that we were both committed to figuring it out and to figuring out what it looks like to work together and do it effectively. I encourage people, if you work together, just remember sometimes you're the business partner and sometimes you're the partner. And don't get those confused, because once you start, those are different fingers on your hand. And when you act like everything's the same thing, you run into trouble.
Yeah. No, I definitely relate, being married for 20 years and the children and everything. It's just, you just have to separate different boxes for sure.
Yep.
Patrick, what would you say, looking back at the book, at your family and your work at the university and the Army, what's something that sticks out in your mind today that you're grateful for?
Oh man, I'm grateful for so much. I really am. I do have a wonderful family. I have led a great life. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I didn't know what life I'd live. I joined the Army and off we went. So I'm very, very pleased and grateful for the life I live. Sometimes I don't behave that way. Actually, Patterson will say to me, he said to me one time, we were getting ready to do something. He said, Patrick, you have a choice. You can drink from the cup of joy or the cup of grief. Which one are you going to do? I think you could just see I was like carrying all this anxiety and frustration in a moment. And I was like, that's right. Drink from the cup of joy. But I think one thing I'm really grateful for is, it sounds abstract, but it's really practical, is I really did spend some time thinking over a course of a period of time, like, why am I here? What am I trying to do? What impact do I hope to make? Or what's my role in life, if you will? And I got crystal clear on that. And it's funny, that was about 20 years ago. I guess 15, 20 years ago, I did that. And I wrote down that my reason for being here on earth is to provide ideas and insights that'll help other people live their great purpose. And now I look at a project like this and I'm like, that's why I wanted to do this so badly, is I think that a lot of people out there are frustrated. They're just getting by. The team's just kind of hanging in there. They feel like they're getting one knock and one curveball after another thrown their way. And to say, wait a minute, you're in the driver's seat of this thing. You can think this thing through. You have everything you need to envision a different future and to begin to manifest it. And the book is full of stories of people. There are people in this book who their disruptive moment may have been a passing comment from someone else. It just stopped them in their tracks. Like, we interviewed Marlon Wayans, the actor, from his family's famous. They did In Living Color and the Wayans brothers and all that. And he had a disruptive moment when he was struggling because the phone wasn't ringing with new gigs. And his brother just said to him, if you want more gigs to come your way, you got to do more than act. You got to write, you got to produce, you got to direct. That was disruptive to him. Then we've got other people that their disruptive moment was, the loss of a loved one or a serious, accident that happened. Some things you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. So the point being is, you don't have to have, those are just their stories. You're going to write your story. And we just hope that you write your story to have stronger relationships, to have a bigger impact in the world, however you define it, and ultimately to live out whatever your great purpose is as you define your great purpose.
How can people get your book, be in touch, and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I'd love it if they would at least check it out. Everywhere you go online, it's available right now. It's in stores. We're recording this right now in mid-September. It's in stores September 29th, so it'll be everywhere. In that regard, you can go to my website, patrickleddin.com, and you can find out more about the book, about speaking, even about the relationship we have with Franklin Covey around the course. There's lots of information out there, but ultimately, I hope you grab a copy, maybe one in triplicate for your friends, and you start to realize that, you can start to shape your future in so many amazing ways. And it's not just one guy saying it or James Patterson saying, like, take my story as James Patterson and make it your story. No, we studied all these people and we realized that there's a pattern they follow. Every time they hit a disruptive moment, they discern what to do, they lean into their behaviors, they achieve results, and then they refine and get better. And we call it the disruptive loop, and they just keep going through that loop one time after another.
I love the concept. The more we can make it simple and practical. It's been great. Good luck with the book. Thank you, Patrick, and really, it's been great.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me, and I wish you all the best luck in your work and in your life.
Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying Common Denominator, make sure to hit like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Leave a review and share the podcast with a friend for more stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all. We appreciate you listening.